Alright, this is going to be probably one of the weirdest videos that I ever made. Because some of you identify as handsome and some of you don't. And now the ones who identify as, they think they're like very handsome men and you start bolding, maybe this is a video that you will be able to identify with. And then the ones who don't, well, first of all, you are handsome. Secondly, maybe this is something you can either empathize with or it is something that's just genuinely funny to you. I don't know, but I think it will be something that is... I'm talking about my personal experience here, and I'm not trying to sell you something. That's why I covered this. These guys, they are not sponsoring me. That's why I made sure we can't even see the name of this company. I just generally didn't do my 25 minutes yet, so I'm doing that, and I have zero clue if that helps. And that's one of the problems we'll talk about. In this industry, there is so much confusion about what works and what doesn't, and it's just pulling money out of everyone's pocket without, really knowing what's happening. Now, let's roll back and start with the story. I grew up and I always, I kind of, at some point, you find out that you're relatively good looking, and I'm not saying that in an arrogant way, but you, at some point you see, okay, it works quite well with the opposite gender, for example, at some point, maybe people that are very honest or very transparent with you, they give you some feedback on how you look like. Maybe sometimes this is even covered in some negative feedback. People tell you, hey, you actually look proper, man, but maybe you should put on some normal clothes from time to time, and something like that. And it's not as bad as with beautiful girls. Because with beautiful girls, for example, if you are a beautiful girl, the world is literally handed to you, right? You have all the options with all kinds of events. You can get anywhere for free. You can even get products for free. And if you can't get them for free, for sure you will find some man that is very attracted to you that will pay for them. Now, as a man, of course, if you're handsome, that's not the case, but obviously it makes some things easier, and it also builds a certain personality within yourself, so you start identifying with this, maybe if you see someone that's good looking in a movie, you're like, yeah, that could be me in 20 years or so. And what you don't do at all is to think about the fact that at some point you might start balding. And there's a very bad thing about this. Because maybe nobody thinks about that ever. Maybe there's people who actively think about that. But for me growing up, that was never an option. And there were there's these voodoo magic tricks and rumors that tell you that you will keep your hair. For example, you look at your mom and your dad and their genetics. You look at, some people told me, I never had a proper beard. So people told me, yeah, you don't have a beard. So great, you will never lose your hair. Absolute BS. But there's things like that you just accept at some point. And you're like, yeah, I guess that's it. I will never have a problem with that. Now, my uncle, his crown is basically non-existent. It's completely bald. So that could have been a warning sign, right? And if you take this seriously, then there could be other warning signs. Like you could go to the trichologist more often. You could, get yourself checked more often, and you could see, is there maybe some deficiency? Maybe there's an iron deficiency, something like that. And just, really look at this. But for me, that was never like a consideration. And to be honest, I don't know if anyone out there, whether you are handsome or you look like complete shit, whether anyone ever worries about going bald until it really starts slowly happening, And when it then starts slowly happening, usually it's a moment that you remember very well. Like for me, I know it was my uncle, and I was in the US at that point in time. I was in the US, and he told me, oh, you're also starting to lose hair. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, nah, it can't be true, right? I'm way too blessed genetically for this to happen for sure. But then sure enough, of course, you go back to the bathroom, you take out your phone like this, and you record a video and you check what the hell is happening on my head, And at that point, to be honest, I didn't see anything, but like maybe something that I imagined, and I was like, okay, maybe like 10% probability that there's something. And then, sure enough, over the next month, you keep checking. At least for me, it was like this. You check, and you see, okay, actually, yeah, like I am losing hair. Now, that is when you encounter one of the big problems. Because if you start losing your hair, right, actually you want to counteract that as quickly as possible, and you want to be as scientific as possible about the measures that you take in order to combat your hair loss. So, for example, you start taking, topical minoxidil. What you want to do ideally is do that for an extended period of time, and then take detailed note about, is that actually helping, so is something changing here on my head, or is it just getting worse, or is it staying the same, which could be a small win, right? And then if it doesn't work, then you want to test the next thing, like you want to start taking finasteride or whatever the hell, right? There's so many options out there. You want to start demo rolling yourself, and you can't, you can do that, but basically you need to pull out your notebook and need to start documenting this. Plus, you don't really know about these micro changes, right? I was thinking, why is there no app out there that really scans your hair in detail, looks at what's happening there? You can do like a 3D shot of your whole hair, and it just analyzes that, maybe with some AI model, and it tells you, look, this is happening. You can get a little bit closer, a bit further away. It tells you, yeah, like your hair got thinner. You lost a little bit of hair here. Maybe here you regrew some hair. It looks thicker. Looks like there's more density to it. For sure, it's longer. Maybe you went to the barber shop, so that also changes things. So you need to be able to give that feedback to this device, AI app, whatever it is, right? And there's nothing like that. And I was thinking, it's so difficult for me genuinely to tell what's happening on my head. And then you just have these shock moments every 6 months where you're like, fuck, this looks worse than 6 months ago. Isn't there some way to track this progress in detail at least once a week or so? So that's something you realize, and maybe some of you have been in the same situation. And now, why the title of this video? Look, if you're good looking as a man, I'm sure it's the same as a woman. It's a little bit like when, I don't know, like some of you might relate with this, some of you might not, but let's say you go to school and you're one of the best students, and the teacher and your parents and your friends, they all tell you, wow, you're going to be so rich at some point, because you're the one who's always getting good grades, and maybe you always get good grades in the business related subjects and stuff like that, right? And people are like, yes, you will be rich, you will be a millionaire someday. Now, what happens to a kid like this is it starts, like building its entire self-worth and identity around that. So you're like, yeah, I guess I need to become a fucking millionaire, because otherwise I will, disappoint all of these people who genuinely think I can do it. Now, if this is your mission in life, becoming a millionaire, then more power to you, right? That's actually great that maybe now you have a little bit of extra pressure and a little bit of extra motivation that keeps you pushing towards that. But the reality is most people probably shouldn't be like, multimillionaires, billionaires, or whatever, because, it's not their true calling in life. They should do something else. They would be much more happy, let's say, building a family or joining a great church nearby, And then what this does, it kind of pushes you into this lane that you don't want to even be in, and it increases the pressure, because next time you meet all of these friends who told you in school that you are going to be the richest guy, but you're not the richest guy, well, guess what? They're going to be kind of disappointed. The same thing happens if you're always good looking, always, like well put together, muscles, athletic, whatever, suddenly you start like losing your hair. It's like this massive, like this small scratch in like this perfect outside illusion, and it's like you blowing up this big beautiful balloon, and now you scratch it. Even this small scratch is going to lead to the balloon losing its whole air. And that's how it feels when you're in this kind of situation, It's like, how is that possible? My genetics are amazing. They are supposed to be, right? And now I'm losing my whole fucking hair. Like, what's going on there? And so, when I talk to friends, sometimes they are like devastated. And for me personally, it was also something that like made me think a lot, like first of all, how it affects me, and how it affects other people. And I never knew that this can be so devastating to men, To me, the biggest thing, like the biggest negative around that was to kind of see how the industry works and how much insecurity there is, because look, if you're fat, let's say you have a problem with your weight, like you look like shit, you're way too fat, then you know what to do, the path, the solution is out there. Go to the gym, eat healthy, it's 100% guaranteed by God that you will lose weight and you will look better. Now, with some other things, some diseases, you also know, there's this medication, you take it and you get better. But with your hair, it doesn't work like this. You start losing your hair and suddenly you are on this quest, which could be like a year or it could take 10 years. But at the end of this quest, if you don't do anything now, you will have no hair. Okay? So in between this time, it's on you to figure out what to do. And now you open TikTok, you open YouTube, you start watching all of these gurus and everybody tells you something different. Topical, oral, rolling, weird oils, some kind of other voodoo tricks, don't wear any hats, whatever, right? There's like literally 30 plus remedies and different myths and methods on what you should do then. And now it's on you to figure out what to do. And the kind of short summary of the story is, by the way, there is no perfect remedy, right? Because we're all different. So what you should or would have to do if you had unlimited money is to go to one of the best trichologists, because, by the way, most of them are not worth their money, right? But there's a few of them that are. So go to the best trichologist, get a complete and detailed analysis of your hair and also of your blood work and so on. Get your blood work done. And then with this dedicated specialist, create a personalized plan for you, exactly you, And this personalized plan will look completely different than what it could look like for, your friend. Even if you guys are same age and do the same stuff, because truth is, you have completely different genetic, right? And that was something that was the most frustrating to me, and still is. It's not like I have cracked this problem. But we're getting closer, and at least it inspired me to start building a solution, to start building something that hopefully many years from now it will be a solution for men that's extremely affordable, costs pennies, and gives them as detailed an analysis and treatment plan for what they should do with their freaking hair loss as multimillionaires and billionaires can access, right? Because that would lead to so many men having just so much better life. From my experience, for example, living in India, I know that for lots of my Indian brothers, this is like devastating, and their whole life evolves around how to keep their hair. Like, what the fuck, and there's nothing out there that's affordable and can really tell you black on white, this is what you should do. It's impossible. So I guess that's the positive side for me, that it inspired me to kind of think about this and think about how can we improve the situation. But I know for many of my friends that, and the ones, especially the ones who are handsome, this is something that is just devastating to them. And it leads to a lot of shame, These are the kind of guys, one of my friends who, like, at 24, 25 or so, he suddenly like started just wearing hats all the time. I never saw him not wearing a hat. And I was so naive back then that I didn't know what's going on, because I was literally never confronted with the topic of going bald or hair loss in my life. It was such a nothing burger for me, right? And now I have this additional experience, and I know that this is something that affects men, and I know how he felt back then, right? I know how all the shame that he felt that now he's losing his hair. Case in point, I mean, now he has very little hair left. But on the positive side, he has accepted the situation. He now has a beautiful, very young family. He had a great business success, built a startup and sold it. And, so it seems like he has moved on, or maybe his priority is just on different things right now. But imagine, you're in your mid-20s, you want to date girls, you want to kind of establish yourself out there in the world, and start losing your hair. That can feel terrible. And then again, right, you have all of these different methods, some scalp massages, finasteride, minoxidil. Some people try to find solutions in their nutrition, which I think is always a good kind of place to start with. Their blood work, whatever, and none of the things really work, right? So it's a very frustrating thing, and at least for me, it really frustrated me. Now, the best thing is, of course, to, if you think in a very philosophical way, the best thing would be to completely ignore this, and say, why is my self-worth and why is my feeling so dependent on my external appearance? Can't I just walk around and look like shit and just be happy anyways, right? That's what some philosophers, maybe some monks, some priests would tell you. Find happiness and luck within. But we all know that, the world, at least for many of us, doesn't work like this. We're constantly surrounded by people who are very superficial, who judge us, and somehow at least some of this sparks something within us, something toxic maybe, that makes us also a little bit like this, a little bit more superficial, so we actually care about these things. So I'm done with this. So here, by the way, we see what's happening, and here, but this is not even as bad, but the main problem is up here. I don't know if you can see it right now very well. Also, trust me, I've done a lot to try to get this under control. And also my hair is very long right now, so it's well covered up, right? But again, right, like ideally we could just come to terms with it, but we know the reality is different, and 99% of us want to find solutions to combat this. And if you kind of grew up as someone that's, good looking, was often labeled as handsome, this might be something that even affects you more, because it just destroys you so much psychologically, because you're like, how can it be that me, with my awesome God-gifted genetics, that I'm starting to lose hair, right? And at least I had something like this at the beginning, and then I started to just like my kind of my shame turned into disappointment, I would say, in the industry, and I decided maybe I can actually do something about it, instead of seeing that as a big negative and something that will now take me down. Maybe I can see it as an opportunity to build something great for us men to combat this massive problem that we have. So, kind of going back, what would have helped me the most, and that's also what I'm trying to develop right now, is a solution that helps you really track what's going on and is it starting. Because if you in your family, like my uncle, as I said, right, he was very unfortunate with his hair. So I should have known that maybe I'm next in line in the genetic order. So what I should have done is, with some kind of tracking device, regularly track what's going on, and not only that, but maybe take some regular blood work, take a good look at nutrition, and as soon as, let's say, I'm doing scans regularly of my head, right? As soon as this tells me that I'm losing hair, I can start combating this. I don't need to wait another year until other people notice, because doing hair scans will notice as soon as something's changing, But if I don't do hair scans, for example, then, I need to wait for someone else to notice this, or for me to notice, which is also very hard, right? Because it's actually hard to notice if, like, you lost a couple of hundreds, a couple of thousands of hairs, right? And then it's hard to track the progress. Like, okay, I started taking this, I started applying that. Did it actually help, right? Unless you take pictures every single day and then you, like a detective, sit down and compare the pictures, from last week and from last month, and then, you're very diligent about it. Unless you do that, which, to be honest, nobody has time for that, you don't actually know what's going on, right? So I would have wished that I had some kind of scan solution that then ideally also gives me some tailored advice based on all the inputs that I give it, which is like these pictures, which is information about my nutrition, which is maybe even information about my blood work, and maybe even more, and all of this should give me some tailored advice. Now, I don't have this perfect solution yet. I'm working on it. We're building something, and at the beginning it will be certainly like an MVP, so it will be like a smaller version of this, a smaller functionality, but the ultimate goal for sure is to have something that gives you all the benefits of going to like the best trichologist in the world, the best hair doctor in the world, and getting his best treatment plan, but getting all of that not for thousands and tens of thousands, but for pennies, basically. And I guess that's the only positive thing about starting to lose your hair.